Star Wars Battlefront is a series that has sold about 43 million units in its lifetime. It's known to many as a nostalgic classic, and others as a series with controversies. But the story of the development is nothing short of interesting. Studios rose and fell around it, and the only way to tackle a subject as big as the entirety of Battlefront is chronologically. I will try my best to cover the behind the scenes, community sentiment, press releases, dev interviews, and of course the game itself. So I'm TheMounTing, and here is the complicated history on Star Wars Battlefront. Two former Activision devs broke off and formed their own game developer company, and that was called Pandemic Studios. They hit the ground running with an investment of $10 million from their former employer. After a couple of titles, they have their first collaboration with LucasArtz, Star Wars: The Clone Wars. It's a majority vehicle-based game with the occasional third-person segment thrown in. One thing that really caught me off guard is that this game was set in the aftermath of Attack of the Clones, bearing in mind that Revenge of the Sith was still in active development. The key with this game is that the executive producer, Greg Berud, wanted to do for ground combat that Rogue Leader did for flying. Pandemic had their own proprietary engine called Zero. As was standard, it was retooled depending on what they developed. Here you can see the building blocks of the games to come: third-person vehicle gameplay, console capabilities, and local multiplayer. It released to relative success with a Metacritic average of 72 out of 100 and 3.1 million copies sold. It's no wonder that LucasArts approached them for their next title. In 2002, following the success of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, LucasArts partnered again with Pandemic Studios, working on something with multiplayer in mind.
The Star Wars universe has continually been one of the most vivid and exciting environments for players and game designers alike. This fall, LucasArts and Pandemic Studios emerged from hyperspace to present Star Wars Battlefront.
In a trailer on a PlayStation demo disc, the driving force behind this game is a multiplayer-focused game with infinite replayability.
You'll log on and you'll see a list of servers that are out there. You can also start your own server.
If you want to play the Battle of Hoth, it's one way to play it single player, but it's a whole new experience when you play it with your friends.
I think you're going to have a huge online community that's going to be building around this game.
No battle is the same, and having played this for over 20 years, I can say to this day I'm still getting new experiences. And on the last Star Wars day, I hosted a server for the community and had my first ever tie.
Wait. We both got defeat screen.
Yeah, look, 0-0 at the top. The first Star Wars game to prominently feature multiplayer is Battlefront 1. In an interview at E3 on the David Lawrence show, and man, can I say how much I miss this vibe? Anyway, multiplayer is how the director of production, Greg Berud, saw this game be played the most. And they're right, if you're striving for infinite possibilities, and every match being different, one way to see that happen is chuck 32 gamers in a battle themed around Star Wars. Whether they have a vendetta against the Ewoks, want to see if the rebels can successfully defend Hoth, or carry on what Anakin started, you can do it all.
This game is just jam-packed with replayability because there's no set outcome. You know, the way you play the game determines how the game's going to end.
Destroy the shield bunker.
With every known faction, whether you're playing as the Rebels, Clones, Empire, and the Separatists, they give you, the gamer, all the choice to ensure even more replayability. Regardless of canon, you can play any of these on any planet, with a few exceptions being big pieces from movies such as Camino, Geonosis, Hoth, and Endor. Otherwise, there are no limits, which brings us back to the interview. It was really important that this game features locations from every single Star Wars film, which stumped me for a moment, wondering which map was Revenge of the Sith. But how could I forget about one map where I'm the Sniper King, and the other one I almost always lose? Kashyyyk. Each faction houses 5 classes, 3 being the same. You have your classic trooper, anti-vehicle, sniper, and then a variant, and then one that's unique to that army.
For example, in the Rebels, you can play as a Wookiee, and a Wookiee, much like Chewbacca, has his bowcaster, but also has the ability to repair things, so he can go around fixing vehicles, building turrets, etc.
This game dev cycle, especially compared to nowadays, is alarmingly short. 2 years from inception to release. And while they have had help with things such as sounds, music, and more elements from LucasArts, it is no mean feat what they've achieved here. I can one this up even further. The final 3 months of this game's development was entirely focused on balancing.
There's a big emphasis on multiplayer in this game.
Right.
So we want to make sure we have plenty of time to be balancing that it's fine-tuned. So once it gets out there and thousands and thousands of people are playing it, it's a good experience.
That's the magic. Everything feels good in its own right, and for different things. Whether you're a classic trooper, rocking a rocket launcher, you can take each other out just as easily, not including the numerous vehicles and turrets you can jump in to further gain an advantage or level the playing field. Although, the rebels having double rockets, or the droids having their tank, is a little busted. When Free Radical was chosen to make Battlefront 3, they were handed the original design document for Battlefront 1, dated the 13th of June, 2003. It has everything you can possibly imagine. I love behind the scenes information. Seeing this 400 plus page document showing everything was incredibly cool. And while I could probably do a 10-hour audiobook, I have grabbed just a couple cool notes from scanning this document. I found the planet choices super fascinating. They had Raxus Prime, which was the planet in the previous title, Clone Wars. Typhera, which although cut was later put into Empire at War in 2006. Corellia, do I need to say any more? The birthplace of our scoundrel, the galaxy's shipyard. At the time we'd seen shockingly little of this planet, but since then it's been in numerous Star Wars projects. Ossus, which is now known as where Luke had his Jedi Temple. Korriban, for you Sith and KOTOR fans. The Speyer Station, which is where the first Death Star was built. Mon Calamari, which is where our resident Trap Admiral Akbar is from. In the original document, only Tatooine, Yavin, Renvar, Kashyyyk, and Naboo made it. It's understandable why they went for more movie locations to keep everyone in the know. However, what it does show is just how passionate these developers are about not only games, but the universe as a whole, which is something echoed by Greg Brod when referring to the design meetings.
No. Just because the language that you speak is not a language that normally comes out of someone who's your height.
You should sit in a design meeting that we have sometimes. It's so silly.
Yeah.
Like,
but
someone was
right
talking about
away.
lasers. It's like, there's lasers everywhere. And then another guy's like, dude, it's the future, man. And another guy's like, no, it was a long time ago. And these are the kind of stupid things that come up all day long. But it's great. I mean, it's just, everyone that works on the team's avid Star Wars fans, knows everything about the movies. It's kind of a prerequisite for being passionate about it.
Just one example of the sheer scope of this project, the planetary bonus for Mon Calamari would have been to gain an attack run by a cruiser every 3 minutes of gameplay. That will randomly destroy enemy units and vehicles. Now, while this was cut, we can see now the inspiration behind the orbital strike power-up for specialists. Some more interesting things that got cut from the final version. We can see the building blocks for the next Battlefront, as it seems Jedi were planned to be playable, with force powers and weaknesses. We also could have had a tournament mode, IG units, but ultimately, the game we got was pretty damn complete. I'm not sure how much of this I can show or discuss, so just in case, we'll keep it to the cover. But what I will say, it's publicly available, and if you find it interesting like I do, you can find it. Battlefront has received multiple updates to the original game as late as 2020. That's right, 16 years after release. Multiple fixes and changes to ensure players can still play multiplayer all these years later. By 2004, at the age of 9, I'd already moved house a couple of times, living the more single-parent life. One thing I got used to doing was getting to know our neighbours, and we happened to get along quite well with them. Their dad, who had coined the name Trevor Davio, and his daughter, while visiting, he had to show us this game he was playing. Growing up, and well, to this day, I'm quite the avid Star Wars fan, and I had that awesome gold videotape of The Phantom Menace. So seeing my neighbour put a disc in his PlayStation 2 and hearing that iconic music we all know and love, I was hooked from that day. I am extremely nostalgic for playing the Dark Trooper on Renvar, because it's the first time I ever went on any notable win streak with people watching. There was 4 of us, so when someone died we would just hand the controller over. It was such a good time.
You really want to get technical.
Let's get technical.
I can't.
Let's get technical.
I can bust some Star Wars ass.
That's right. There you go.
I can tell
Please
you.
be careful. We're on live radio. Go ahead. Back to the chat room.
As a Gen 1 Armor fan of the clones, this actually made me prefer this game over the second as a kid, despite the difference in Galactic Conquest. There has not been a year in my life since this released that I haven't played it, and weirdly enough, hosted a game to this day with my friends in Singapore and Australia, it's surprisingly playable. One thing that felt unique to me was how they managed the battlefield itself. Command posts that you captured weren't there for points on a scoreboard, it was simply an additional respawn point for you, and one less for them. It makes the game surprisingly tactical, where you focus your attention where it absolutely matters. If you want to make the rebels lose in the Dune Sea, keep them between you and the Tuscans. There could be a base out of the way, but this is where their vehicles spawn. Do you make it your target or not? These all add levels of nuance that isn't needed, but can enhance the experience for those who do. You have made it both fun to pick up and play, or made it that bit better for those who might take it a bit more seriously. The campaign takes you through all the victories, which is pretty cool, as you get to play both sides of the conflict in the prequel and original trilogy. This was seen as the #1 way by the developers for people to play single player. I personally think Galactic Conquest and Instant Action are the way to go, but due to the story being nothing more than a battle scenario, it is very easy to see why they thought like this. An involved story is great, but this way of doing it makes it much more replayable. In Galactic Conquest,
you battle your enemy one planet at a time for total control of the galaxy.
if you were to ask any Battlefront fan what was their favourite thing to do, at least amongst my friends, it was Galactic Conquest. On the David Lawrence show, director of production, Greg Borrard, said that this mode was inspired by the game Risk, each planet representing a power-up you may want for yourself, or take from your enemy.
We have a new mode which we call Galactic Conquest that we're pretty excited about. And what this is imagine a board game like a Risk, where we're looking at it and we decide which battles we want to play on. And we then jump in as a group of players and go out and fight out that battle. Whoever wins it now controls that planet. The more planets I control, the more kind of bonuses I can bring to bear in the battlefield.
What you do and why is vital to the playthrough. If you can sabotage vehicles, the droids are useless on the plains of Naboo. And you can only have that power-up if you take Bespin. This mode was my most played, and it's the absence of this that's felt most in later titles. Without word vomiting all of my thoughts on this game, I think you can tell pretty well how I feel about it as a whole. After all that, how was the game received? Collectively, it sold over 4 million units. According to Metacritic, it scored an average of 79, which for the first in the series, and with the benefit of hindsight, we now know how beloved it really is. One consistent criticism the game has received is that the AI was too easy. Unfortunately, it's getting harder and harder to find articles and full reviews, between pages not being available, businesses closing, domains going up for sale. However, one thing is clear, LucasArts were happy with the product, how it was received, and already agreed with Pandemic to make a second.
When news of the first advance reached the 501st, we knew that now we'd have to take the battle into space.
At E3, in an interview with David Collins, a sound engineer from LucasArts, going in, making a sequel, one thing was pretty clear.
So with the sequel, what we're trying to do is we're really trying to up the ante in every way that we can. You know, we went out and we listened to what the fans wanted. We solicited their feedback. We had a lot of cool ideas that we wanted to do in the sequel if we were going to do a sequel. Some things we wanted to do with the original that we're putting into the sequel that I want to show you really quickly.
Now, we covered the design document of Battlefront 1, so we got a snippet of one of the big additions to the game. Heroes. This can create an interesting challenge. How do you make them feel right in a game where balance is a core focus? In that same interview, they showcase how it works. Whoever is playing well for a team will be prompted to become a hero or villain. For every enemy you fell, a bit of health is added on, but your health is constantly ticking down. This is the best way to do it, because it covers a couple challenges. Someone can't grab the hero and hide somewhere. And even if they do perform, the chances they'll hold onto their favourite Jedi is very slim. Let's face it, we've all watched the films, and some of us have seen the TV shows. You don't want to be one of those heroes or villains and not be able to slice enemies like butter. And that is what they maintained. A complete power fantasy in every sense, just with a time limit. The core gameplay got some work too. In the original, you could obtain accolades at the end, such as Bantha Fodder, Killing Spree, Deadeye, and many more. But this was nothing more than just acknowledgement of how your game went, to either laugh or brag to your friends about. Now the game has taken on a more modern approach in the battle. You can earn accolades in the middle of the match that will earn you rewards for a life, such as the Frenzy Rifle, a deadly burst fire weapon that will annihilate anyone who approaches, and each class has something just like this. Now, this might separate the oldies from the youngins, but are you a sprinting guy? Sometimes I really like the simplicity of the old Halos, Unreal Tournament and Quake, but I also like the movement of Titanfall. So what do you prefer? Let me know in the comments. And are you happy that Battlefront 2 added sprinting? While the franchise has always been home to some fairly epic space battles between Death Star 1 and 2, Phantom Menace, but there is something about the chaos in the battle over Coruscant that really brings it home. Space battles is the most notable addition to the game. Gone are the days of flying your ships in ground battles. Now you can have insane dogfights, take on capital ships such as Venice's Star Destroyers and frigates, and more. If you want to stay in your ship, you can target specific systems like the engines, communications array, the shields. Or if you want to get out of your cockpit, you can destroy the vital systems from the inside. Ultimately, everything you do earns points, so how you do it, whether it's in the turret deck, spaceship, or capital ship, player choice is the core focus. Something silly I used to always do was be a mechanic. What's that? My shields are down? Sure, I'll spend 10 minutes with a fusion cutter, making necessary repairs to our shields, even though I could probably just go on a full offensive and win much quicker. But I found this really cool, and it allowed younger me to roleplay in this game. This added even more depth into Galactic Conquest, because now you could place fleets guarding planets, or attempt to intercept them, making them battle you in space to be given the opportunity to fight on the ground. You start with a singular fleet, but whether you buy additional unit types, more fleets, or bonuses, that is your choice, as the old system of tying them to planets is gone. It's in these little details that Battlefront has done well. You can engage with this in multiple ways. All could lead you to the same end goal, and give you, the player, ownership. Do you prioritize heavy troopers to take down enemy vehicles? Do you buy marines to make invading capital ships even easier? That is all up to you. There is something almost comedic about how many kids were sitting there listening to harrowing war stories on the 501st on a Saturday morning as they played their new Star Wars game.
Of course, that's pretty much the way it was for all of us, wasn't it? All that breeding, all those years of training. It doesn't really prepare you for all the screaming or the blood, does it? Frankly, I'm still amazed we ever made it through the first hour. Never mind the first day.
Much like how everything else got expanded, the story was not left out. You, the player, will follow the journey of the 501st from their first battle on Geonosis, the main battles in Revenge of the Sith, through Order 66, which means you'll be going into the Jedi Temple, and making sure Vader didn't miss any of those pesky younglings. Much like the first game, it will cover both eras of Star Wars, including one of the coolest missions, dealing with a rebellion on Kamino, where you battle with the cloners attempting to make their own army to overthrow the Emperor. As usual, the story will serve as a tutorial, especially in the case of the first 3 missions. However, it does stand on its own 2 feet. Compared to its predecessor, which was a more glorified battle scenario mode, this takes you through a journey of being Vader's fist all the way to their victory at Hoth, which is a nice change, seeing as in a few Star Wars games you normally end up changing sides to always be the good guy. And this was before the inhibitor chip explanation, which gives us a much more human feeling with the clones. And it gave us some of the most iconic lines in all Star Wars games.
When the 501st was finally rotated out of Felucia, Ayla Secura made a point of seeing us off personally, calling us the bravest soldiers she had ever seen. It's a good thing we were wearing helmets, because none of us could bear to look her in the eye.
1 year and 1 month later, the sequel to the best-selling Star Wars game released on the 31st of October 2005. How was Battlefront 2 received? It is often seen as Battlefront 1, but bigger and better in almost every way. However, that's not how everyone felt at the time. It's interesting seeing that the game mileage would be considered low if you weren't into multiplayer. I personally didn't even play this game online until I got a PS3. But that's a conversation for another time. Depending on the reviewer, it was praised for its offline play and condemned for its multiplayer, or vice versa. It seems that no one could fully agree what exactly a Battlefront game should be.
If you're looking for a quantum leap from the first Battlefront, you won't find it here. But if you wanted a solid, team-based Star Wars shooter with a few incremental improvements from Battlefront 1, then Battlefront 2 is exactly what you're looking for.
Others cited while smarter AI units are now here, it doesn't go far enough to create the same challenge that online play does, despite being an improvement on the first one. And I can agree, even on the hardest mode, my kill-death ratio rarely suffers. But my brothers in arms usually perform far worse, resulting in a loss regardless of how I do. Overall, it reviewed well, with an average PC Metacritic rating of 78, 84 on the PS2, and 83 on the Xbox, and the PSP port a 69. The main issue for PSP being weird controls and poor optimization, but we can say it was a complete success for Pandemic Studios, selling over 6 million copies by 2007. That's 2 million more than its predecessor. It has gone on and sold even more copies, hitting 10 million by the year 2020. And I'm wondering, personally, how many of those are nostalgic millennials like myself picking it up on PC finally. With concerns such as how much longevity you will get without multiplayer, it would be silly if I didn't go into the expanded game modes now available. In the original, it was simply the Battlefront mode. Capture the command post, drain their reinforcements before yours are drained. So what do we have now? Let's start with perhaps the funniest of all, Hunt mode. Have you ever thought, I wish I could show the world that Tuskens are way better than Jawas? Well, now you can, because this mode puts the indigenous species of a planet against each other, or defending themselves against an onward invader. Whether it's Wampus on Hoth, Gungans on Naboo, or Ewoks on Endor, all of your insane fantasies are possible, and they haven't even tried to balance this. Gungans have a repair tool and 20 grenades. That's it, and it's great. You also have 1 and 2 flag capture the flag, space assault, space capture the flag, assault, which is essentially heroes team deathmatch, and a PC only game mode of XL, which doubles the number of AI, making battles on Geonosis feel just like the simulations, and of course, the movie. A fact I didn't know until about a year ago was that Battlefront 2 had DLC. When I was younger, I was more of a PlayStation and Nintendo kid. As a result, I missed the exclusive DLC that Xbox had. It contained one of the coolest Jedi out there, Kit Fisto with unique abilities and a saber, along with Sarge Ventress, both based on the 2003 Clone Wars cartoon. This also brought some classic maps back to the sequel, with Renvar, Bespin, and Yavin all making an appearance. It opened up the Hero Assault mode to Coruscant, Maigitu, and Naboo, and a Wampa-themed hunt being added to Renvar, with the last of the console updates being backwards compatibility for the Xbox 360. This wasn't needed at the time for the Sony, as the 60 gig edition of the console could natively play PS2 games. One of the final things released for the community was a program called Zero Editor. This allowed anyone willing to create custom maps and so much more. On the screen is a snippet of the level of documentation, so you can also make your Star Wars dream come true. Something that affected many older PC games was the shutting down of GameSpy in 2014. This powered so many games, and its loss meant no multiplayer for the games it was on. As with any tool, there was an alternative if you were willing to look for it, but something cool to know is that it ended up being fixed in a patch alongside a release of the series on GOG. At the time, how many 12-year-old games do you know were getting an update to fix functionality? In a time of the Stop Killing Games movement, it's important to recognize that some devs got it right already. With the outstanding success of the series as a whole, and the next generation of consoles coming, fans eagerly awaited the next installment in the series. But without knowing anything from behind the scenes, nobody could have predicted what actually happened.
Well done, gents. With flying like that, the Republic is well on its way to victory.
Following the rapid success of both Battlefront 1 and 2, Pandemic had already begun work on a third installment. Unfortunately for them, LucasArts wanted to maintain the current cycle of quick releases, and with the third installment being lined up with the new consoles, the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, And unfortunately for fans of the series, this was an end of Pandemic working in Battlefront. In an interview with Videogamer.com on their podcast, Battlefront 2 designer Dan Nanny explained how they had in fact begun work on Battlefront 3, but with negotiations it just didn't take off. Nanny stated, "It was the transition to a new console. When you're moving to a new console, it's not as easy as saying, let me just make a game like we did for the old console. New consoles have new hardware, and new hardware comes with new limitations, and you don't know exactly what you're going to get until you've got it." Nani further elaborated, "When somebody says, I want you to make another game for us in 1 year, and you don't know what tools you're working with, you can't make an accurate prediction on whether or not you can hit it. So I think negotiations stalled out, because I think we wanted more time to work on it. But obviously, LucasArts was also trying to align it with their own marketing beats." What interested me reading this article was hearing who began the pioneering of some of the features that stood out to us so clearly, looking at the footage to this day. Nani said the following, "Oh man, it was cool. We had some tech on it that was pretty fun, and space to ground was working really well. To the team, this felt like the natural evolution following Battlefront 2, a big battlefield that is Star Wars all the time." On the new Video Gamer podcast, Delacamp Seifert, I really hope I got that correct, the lead designer for Battlefront 2, said the following, "Yeah, Free Radical was using ideas that we initiated. When we told LucasArts we can't create the new game on next-gen tech in only 10 months, they took it away from us, then shopped it around to other studios. In effect, they caused multiple studios to tank using this logic. We'd have gladly got it done in 2-3 years, but you don't change to a new platform, especially as it launches, on such a short schedule. Considering the grind we'd just been on through the 2 games, it was the right call for us, even though it meant Lucas tried to go elsewhere." Looking back, it's really funny to see someone say, given a good 2-3 years, we could have made something really special. Especially now with the new standard of AAA titles taking upwards of 7 years to develop. And even then, the extra time they were asking for was simply because of a new hardware generation. As far as shooting pedigree goes, Free Radical is quite something. The UK-based developer not only had many staff come from Rare who worked on games such as GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, but this was the team responsible for the Time Splitters franchise. The second game having an average Metacritic score of 90, along with being known for a light-hearted and fast-paced shooter, LucasArts are looking for a new developer with shooter experience and one that could fit in their time frame. It's no wonder they ended up going with Free Radical. It should have been a match made in heaven. Not only is Time Splitters known for having a fun arcade arena mode, playing split screen with your friends, but an enjoyable story mode. And with how much of a story focus Battlefront 2 had, it's only natural they want to go even further. This is a documentary about the series as a whole. In 2025, if you weren't following it at the time, you might be saying to yourself, well, we never received a Battlefront 3. Going in, the expectations were clear. A developer that is capable of releasing a shooter on the next generation of consoles. Free Radical began its development in 2006. And while this project never saw the light of day, it's thanks to numerous people that received early builds and footage of what could have been a game that changed the industry and franchise forever. I've been lucky enough to get my hands on the design document for this game as well, and to say they have put a considerable amount of effort into the campaign is an understatement. As we covered in the beginning of this video, the story mode was treated traditionally as an introduction to the game's core mechanics, a way to immerse yourself in the universe, but ultimately take yourself to what was deemed infinitely replayable, and that was the multiplayer. This document details so much, and it goes from not only the Clone Wars, through Order 66, past the destruction of the Death Star 2, but you even end up fighting Imperial remnants featuring some of the iconic galactic heroes, such as Luke Skywalker. So here is a brief story overview. I'm also able to confirm these points with the leaked build of Battlefront 3. 18 years before the invasion of Naboo in Episode 1, a Jedi Master and his Padawan are forced to make an emergency landing on Kamino. The Padawan, a young man named Duron Iza, is badly injured. The Kaminoans offer him treatment and send them on their way, but in secret the Kaminoans create 2 clones using Duron's genetic material, a Prime clone and a backup, named EX-101 and EX-102, respectively. For you Star Wars nerds out there, this is prior to Cypher Diaz commissioning the clone army, and these 2 will be instructors for Jango's clones. Throughout their journey, we're able to see the natural temperament of the brothers, one being much more decisive and ready to fight by any means, whilst the other more patient, level-headed. They will clash regularly on how to get things done as a result. Despite this, they will remain side by side throughout the entire Clone Wars, and it isn't until much after Order 66, when they've assumed the role of Inquisitors, and ordered to destroy a village for harboring a Jedi, that enough was enough. EX-102 abandons his brother in defense of the village. It's here where the characters learn their true origin. But there isn't much time for this new father-son relationship, as you're killed by your older brother. But all is okay, as your new Jedi dad wins his fight, but in classic underhandedness of the dark side, he's caught off guard from defeat, mortally wounding him, leaving his brother dead and the Jedi on his way out. With the last of his Force energy, you're brought back to life. Now we can only assume time has passed as 102 has longer hair, a beard, and has become a farmer trying to live a peaceful life, when you're visited by none other than Ram Kota, and we can tell that this was after Force Unleashed 1, as he's already been blinded by Starkiller. EX-102, with a new name of Karso Iza, fighting for the Rebellion, and the other fighting for the Empire, which will eventually end with a duel between brothers, the ultimate showcase of light versus dark. Thanks to the leaked builds, we're able to see the bones of almost every cutscene, and this would have been the most ambitious Star Wars story for a Battlefront game yet. We have a whole cast of new characters, many returning heroes with plenty of action, exposition, and certainly a massive upgrade on the previous journal-based campaign or the battle scenarios of the first. There is one cutscene in particular that goes incredibly hard, and I will play it for you here.
Henceforth, you shall be known as Darth Vader.
The Separatists have gathered on the Mustafar system. I'm going there to end this war.
I have failed you, Anakin. I have failed you.
The core pillars behind Battlefront 3, one being the standout feature, a vertical battlefront. You as the player should be able to choose how you engage in a battle and win, be it the ground, dogfights, or in space taking on capital ships. All of these will have a knock-on effect on each other, whether you're doing the objective directly, like taking out a shield generator, or flying into their ship to prevent reinforcements. And what's amazing is that we can see exactly that with the gameplay. Following on from the success of the Xbox exclusive DLC for Battlefront 2, this was planned again, but for all platforms, giving the player opportunity to buy additional maps, heroes, and expanded game modes. This is also seen as a way to facilitate the move from a yearly to a bi-yearly release. Much like prior Battlefront games, they wanted to maintain its pick-up and play model, keep the player happy and avoid the complexity that more hardcore style games can introduce. Going through this document, this game would have been a wonderful blend of what made Battlefront 1 and 2 great, while also adapting the formula. For example, there were plans to have the player be able to actively control the capital ship. Next stop, full ramming speed. This segment is a lot of he said, she said. There's been conflicting reports with the actual state the game was in and why it was cancelled. I have blended interviews with the founders, devs, and the Free Radical Archive in particular. Now going in, I believe it's important to clarify how an alpha for LucasArts differs from the industry standard. So when we talk about alpha and beta builds, you understand the guideline everyone was operating on. The specifications are no A or B1 bugs, and their definitions are A bug that makes further progress through the game impossible, includes crash bugs, stuck bugs, critical path, auto death, and missing critical path objectives. A B bug, functional bugs that do not make further progress impossible, including art, sound, gameplay, controller, logic, etc. A 1 bug, a critical bug. QA believe that this bug must be fixed in order for the game to be shipped. Content complete, except any planned downloadable content, still needs balancing and tuning, and still needs some art polishing. That is what LucasArts defines as an alpha build. In a Kotaku article dating back to the May the 4th, 2012, quoting a lengthy interview with Eurogamer, Free Radical's founder describes how ultimately work on the Star Wars game led to the studio's downfall. While it was a dream come true, it was ambitious, and for 2 years all signs were positive. They had a good working relationship, and milestones were being met regularly. We can see confidence. There was even, for a brief moment, an Amazon listing for Battlefront 3 with a planned release of the 15th of March, 2009. This is further proven with LucasArts agreeing for a Battlefront 4, and I found this on the following. The key idea of Battlefront 3 was that players could seamlessly transition from a small-scale gunfight into a space battle by simply climbing into a ship and taking off. It was so ambitious because you had to populate an environment like that on a scale like that, so we had some tough nuts to crack. We were continually trying to improve that, and it was going well. In fact, it was going so well, we were going to make 2, and they were letting us do some really interesting stuff with the mythology. Just look at this dark side old Ben. This is the most metal Obi-Wan has ever looked. We began thinking that the dates were looking a bit tight, so we thought we'd do what we had never done before and let LucasArts know our concerns. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Because LucasArts had been so good to work with, we thought they'd see the sense in what we're saying, and that coincided with LucasArts president, Jim Ward, not being there one day. Jim Ward would resign for personal reasons, but because he believed in delaying games, and I found the following from a supposed insider ILM, a division of Lucasfilm, in quotes, "Whether Jim Ward resigned or was asked to leave is up in the air. However, one thing is clear, and that is Mitch and the company were unhappy with his delaying of The Force Unleashed and Indiana Jones titles. They also didn't trust his numbers for increasing expected sales as a basis for delaying the game. LucasArts has a motto, and that is to release kick-ass games on time, on budget. Of the 3, Jim chose to prioritize kick-ass games over on time and on budget." Free Radical Doak further elaborated, "We still thought we'd do the right thing. And then we went from talking to people who were passionate about making games to talking to psychopaths who insisted on having an unpleasant lawyer in the room. From there, conditions continued to worsen, LucasArts stopped payments to Free Radical, and after 6 months, it was wearing heavily on the team. This was in part due to the fact that Free Radical had no debt and was running purely on money in the bank, but that was now running out. The March milestone submission, despite no longer being the alpha, was one of the builds sent to Rebellion. This build would get discovered on a Rebellion Xbox development kit by game collectors in 2012 and got leaked to the public in 2016. As it can be seen from the leaked March build, the game had problems such as low performance and bad AI. This led to the April milestone, aiming to fix 800 A issues and B1 issues. After the Alpha milestone failed by LucasArts standards, it was decided to have content cut and mechanics simplified to make up for the time missed, such as the final mission on Kashyyyk and many vehicles, but it also highlighted some areas that had to be reworked with the AI system, making it much more objective focus. On YouTube, an account named Fuza released an internal trailer. It looks amazing, but on the Free Radical fandom wiki, the following quote was found. The FRD engine was really stretched beyond its capabilities, and there were a lot of issues with the game that had to be fixed. The footage that was released was carefully selected and edited to make the game look more finished than it was. For portfolio purposes, etc., there was easily 6 to 12 months of work left, from an unnamed Free Radical employee. Haze, another title in works by Free Radical, was released in May 2008, during the middle of Battlefront 3's development cycle, and was unfortunately, for them, met with poor critical reception. They had previously told LucasArts that the delays would get them the good scores they wanted. From then onwards, May 2008, Free Radical would never hit a milestone successfully again. Doak said the following: "My role at Free Radical meant that I was simultaneously involved in these unpleasant, high-level discussions with psychopaths who wanted to destroy us, and then the next day, sitting with our dev staff at their desks trying to boost people's morale, helping them to pass milestones that I knew would subsequently be manipulated to cause them to fail. It was the most depressing and pointless thing that I have ever been involved in. The dream job which I once loved became a nightmarish torture." An ex-LucasArts employee would go as far as suspecting Free Radical for Battlefront 3 to help development of Haze, and later Time Splitters 4, which was in pre-production since at least mid-2007, calling it akin to a Ponzi scheme, where time and budget from the next game was being used to finish the previous, late title. This was strongly refuted by founder Steve Ellis, who pointed out that Haze delay was fully financially supported by its publisher, Ubisoft. The allegation that we used LucasArts money to fund the completion of Haze is false. Aside from anything else, we didn't need to. When Haze slipped, Ubisoft supported us by increasing the dev budget to cover the extra time. The ironic thing about this allegation, though, is that just about every publisher we worked with would simultaneously worry that we might spend their money elsewhere. But they would invariably ask us to move resources from another project onto theirs. Our answer was always the same. If we do that for you now, how do we know we won't do it for someone else later? They never liked it, but it seemed like the only way to treat everyone fairly. Steve Ellis would also claim that the game was almost finished. We had 99% of a finished game that just needed bug fixing for release. This statement in particular is what pushed the ex-LucasArts employee to reach out to GameSpot in the first place, calling it BS and giving his own generous estimate of a 75% of a mediocre game. Ellis would respond that the leaked video showed that the game was content complete, and all that was left was to fix bugs. He stated that the completion rate of the game would be calculated based on the number of open bugs in the database, with a possible release date being predicted based on the rate of bug fixing versus the rate of bug discovery. At the time of cancellation, the major bugs, known as the must fix, would have been handled under 3 to 4 weeks. Ellis recognizes that 99% was an exaggeration, but it was closer to 97 or 98%. Our closest look as to what state the game was in is thanks to an employee who took home the company's Wii test kit. These kits would be discovered in December 2024 at an e-waste recycling center, where the Free Radical archive would find a build dated the 21st of November 2008, just 1 week prior to the cancellation of the game. This build is much further ahead than the previously leaked March 2008 Xbox 360 build. However, it has some specific Wii problems, and some of the assets are not complete as in the next-gen versions. Regardless, it is representative of the game's final design and can be used to see how near the game was to completion. Playing the Wii build, it can be seen the game's planned content was implemented and functional. In a tweet dating back to the 15th of April 2023, a post saying, "Alright game dev folks, what's your one that got away? It could be an IP you wanted to work on, a studio you wanted to work for, anything of the sort." Michael Barclay, a former level designer for Free Radical, says, "I feel like it's been long enough to come out and say Star Wars Battlefront 3 was gonna be legit incredible, and the fact it got cancelled 2 yards from the finish line is an absolute crime. Gamers don't know what they were robbed of." This certainly lines up with what the founders had been saying, and now all we hear about Battlefront 3 is what could have been. Regardless of how this project went down, it is clear that this game could have truly changed the gaming space forever. It aimed to push the boundaries of everything we knew about the series whilst fulfilling every Star Wars fan's dream. And it's truly a shame they were not allowed the additional time to finish what they started, or that Pandemic weren't given the time that they asked for to begin with. What's truly amazing though is thanks to a collection of individuals this simply wouldn't be possible. From those who found dev kits at e-recycling centers, people in the community such as Fuzar, Clone Trooper 163, who has even begun work on yet another unreleased Star Wars game, The First Assault, Clone Commander Omar, who has put together the Free Radical Archive Discord and fandom wiki, detailing everything from Battlefront 3, 4, Haze and Time Splitters. While this is the last mainline Battlefront game for a while, there was still some being developed for the handheld generation. But before we get there, let's truly put a respect on everything that Free Radical went through and just sit here and appreciate what they made. And imagine a world where this saw its release.
The biggest game franchise in Star Wars history continues with an all-new mission. Star Wars Battlefront Renegade Squadron.
During the development of Battlefront 3, following the success of the Battlefront 2 PSP port, they wanted to capitalize on this by making a follow-up. K.C. Coleman, assistant producer at LucasArts, said the following. "First off, we all know about the fact that the game is built from the ground up for the PSP. From this, we crafted a twofold mission statement, or main goal for the project. 1. Deliver a fun, compelling game with all the features and highlights of a traditional Battlefront experience that the millions of fans out there have come to expect. 2. Consider the PSP audience that likes to play games on the go and sometimes for shorter periods of time compared to consoles. From my time trying out this game, that much is very clear. Battles are quick, maps are smaller, and the missions short. However, this does not mean they haven't found a way to iterate and add more compared to the previous games in the series. This might be the most customizable one to date. Each faction has a bunch of options, so I just had to create something close to an ARC Trooper. This goes beyond just visual. Whenever you go to a command post, you can very easily swap between weapons. Suddenly you need to deal with a tank. Don't worry, head over to the command post and just grab a rocket launcher. At first, I thought this was counter to the quick pickup and playstyle, but once you get used to navigating the menu, this is all extremely quick. My favourite part of this game is how they simplified galactic conquest. This turned into a game of risk, almost literally. While doing your usual taking over of planets, fighting on the field or in space, you can also just treat it like a board game and never leave the map overview. Just assign troops, recruit them, and move them around like a Star Wars Kong Ming. However, the most unhinged thing I saw was that the remains of Alderaan is a territory you can capture, and it's just an asteroid field. The story mode is limited to the original trilogy, where a ragtag group of less savoury characters such as bounty hunters, smugglers, and mercenaries, as they needed soldiers and did not want to train anyone, following the Battle of Yavin. Being the elite force who they are is very unknown to many in the Alliance, and with the defeat of the Empire in the Battle of Endor, they vanished back into their previous jobs. The only thing keeping them loyal was their hatred of the Empire. In an interview with GameSpy, they asked Casey Coleman, the assistant producer, why just the PSP? Rebellion came to us and said, you know what, we really have a great idea for how we're going to get this game done. We have the right technology, we have the right feature set, 8-player support over infrastructure, 16-player over ad hoc Wi-Fi, and we think there's a lot of really fun elements to the game that would attract users. Not only to the game, but to buying the PSP. We actually think this is a game that can help sell hardware and help sell games for us. This would be the first Star Wars game made by the UK developer Rebellion, and very little information on this game's development exists, to the point where this game isn't even listed on their own website. So it's a good job we have this interview. GameSpy further asks, you've done a lot of testing on Battlefront, and you're familiar how the game should play ideally. How is that translating over to PSP? While there are some issues with the last PSP one, and by that they mean the port of Battlefront 2, it was a lot better than people expected. Coleman replies, I would say that the development time on the PS2, PSP version was very, very short. We put that platform out in a very, very short amount of time, and this had a lot more time to make our feature set, to make our technology. Rebellion Studios is very comfortable with their engine. They know very well from the legacy of games they've been able to make. Gameplay on this will play much more like the PS2 game or a full console version. It's actually about 20% bigger than Battlefront 2, when you add all the different features and things that we've updated, like Galactic Conquest, customization. There's a lot more gameplay in there. We've taken feedback on it from players who've played Battlefront 2 on PSP. We've taken a lot of control feedback. We've re-updated the controls. They're a lot more arcadey. You can use the control knob to move around. We've given you an auto walk. We've updated the space controls and just the space mechanics in general as well. You have an auto lock on in space, where it'll pull your craft to line up a shot at an enemy. It'll really give the player a nice, easy feeling of, I can ramp up and figure out how to play this game in a relatively short amount of time. But hopefully there's enough depth so that players feel like they're advancing. It was also confirmed there would be no DLC, and they said the following. We've explored that, and it's really a Sony issue for us. Sony haven't really gotten back to us on some things that we need to do. And at this point in time, our timeline, it's so far down the road right now that we're heading towards the final push. We just really don't have the time to put into downloadable content at this point. But we're exploring different ways that Sony could help us maybe after we hit the market. Renegade launched in October 2007, was well received on release with a Metacritic average of 73, all stating how important the multiplayer was as it supported 8 versus 8 matches. It was the second best-selling PSP game in the US the week of its release, and was still among the list of Gamefly's most rented PSP games in December 2007. It continued to be a top seller in the US and UK several months after its release, and in the end, it totaled around 10 million copies sold worldwide. Some of the criticisms were focused more on how clumsy or sluggish it was, and it certainly is. Even playing this on emulator with a normal controller, you are heavily reliant on auto-targeting. It works well enough, but if you're like me, it kind of feels like you're cheating, or on easy mode. But as a whole, with the lack of twin sticks, it was probably the only viable solution. Inspire asked a great question when it came to the controls. They said, do you feel making the game even more arcadey to compensate to make it fit the PSP hardware is going to alienate fans of the franchise as the gameplay stands right now? Coleman replies, no, definitely not. We made sure we put in the Battlefront 2 controls as well. Battlefront 2 was the most successful Star Wars game on the PSP for us. The number 3 PSP game of all time. We know that there's a great fanbase out there for this particular game on this particular platform. We obviously needed to have that control scheme in there for them. When I say arcadey, it means that it's much more accessible for the beginning user. And they're also going to find a lot of rich elements in the gameplay, as well as once they actually pick up the controls and play it. I find myself enjoying this game, and if I was younger and I was given this when it came out, I would have played this to death. It's hard to justify going back to it today. It's a game of its time, with controls limited by its hardware, and gaming has moved on. But it is to no surprise with the reviews and sales numbers that LucasArts wanted a second. But before that, here is something I never even heard of. All I can find on Star Wars Battlefront Mobile Squadrons is that it was released in March 2009 for $5.99, and I found this description of the game, because there are only a handful of screenshots. The player gets to choose to be a member of the Galactic Republic or Confederacy of Independent Systems during the Clone Wars, or a member of the Rebellion or Empire during the Galactic Civil War. There are 3 classes. That's it. That's all I could find. If you know anything more about this game, please let me know in the comments.
Sector 5, all clear. Enemy grounded air assault! Go, go! Look out!
And now, for the first time ever, we're taking Battlefront Elite Squadron to both the DS and the PSP.
Following the success of Renegade Squadron and then Battlefront 3's cancellation, LucasArts wanted a follow-up they knew they could count on. Free Radical handed over the assets they created to UK developer Rebellion to make Elite Squadron, and having access to both the unreleased Battlefront 3, and this might be a surprise to you, and say we did in fact get Battlefront 3, just in a handheld form. In an early behind-the-scenes developer video of Elite Squadron, the marketing was clear, bringing the player even closer to the movies than ever before. What you do in space, in the sky, and on the ground all affect each other. And we know that the game launched with an infrastructure mode that allowed 16 players to fight wherever they wanted on the battlefield. One thing was emphasized: these games are not ports. They were built from the ground up for PSP and the Nintendo DS. Obviously, we know after the fact that assets were handed over by Free Radical, and drawing comparisons from the leaked Xbox and Wii build for the campaign of Elite Squadron, you can clearly see it was, at a minimum, used as a reference point. This cutscene in particular shows how similar it can be, but credit where it is due, there are differences, a change in pacing, dialogue, and some additional animations. All the same story beats are present, and generally all the same characters make an appearance. The biggest cut seems to be with the exposition. Characters like Ram Kota don't appear. No meaningful conversation with Luke Skywalker. The connection between X2 and Jedi For Order doesn't have that same heartbreak feel it did in the original. For the longest time, I saw images of a tattooed up Palpatine, and I was sure it was the Emperor himself, in some kind of alternate universe, but it's actually the main character's older twin brother, X1. These cuts could have happened for a variety of reasons, such as file size on the disc from a 0.9 or 1.9 gig disc for the PSP compared to the 7 for Xbox. And then when you think about the DS version, which is just 64 megabytes. This game was made with handheld in mind, so it could be a matter of not wanting to have the player watching multi-minute cutscenes when it was meant to be played quickly and on the go, which is a design philosophy you can see and they have told us repeatedly.
Whether you have a PSP or a DS, this game has something for you. It takes all of the beloved aspects of Battlefront and brings it to you in a mobile aspect. So air-to-ground combat, easy accessibility, being able to connect ground battle to space battle, being able to affect the outcome of both, all of that on your handheld, PSP and DS.
This game was received from moderate to poorly by reviewers, with an average Metacritic score of 63. The main draw of the criticism coming from either not enough innovation from the previous games, or poor controls. And with the limitations of the hardware itself, it's no wonder they went with the lock-on style that was used in the previous Renegade Squadron. I got my hands on this game and gave it a go for myself, and it feels largely the same. Ironically, the best part of the gameplay is the space battles, purely because you have full control of up and down, and it's what's most jarring about playing as a trooper with a controller. Especially when you look up to strike an ATST, or someone is above you, and there's no target below, the camera pans incredibly slowly back down to center. Built from the ground up for the Nintendo DS, while it follows the same story, the reality of fitting a near gigabyte game into a 64MB cartridge had its effects, and as a result, reviewed a little bit worse than its sibling on the PSP, with an average score of 61. When it comes to gameplay, there is one area in particular where you feel the clunkiness the most, and that is melee combat. For a good portion of this game, this won't affect you, but it will if you play through the campaign. As a whole, it's the same as its predecessor. It has a story of Battlefront 3, but like the other games, it shines most with its multiplayer, 8v8 infrastructure mode, which was explained best in this interview.
Imagine now that you're on Hoth and there is ground battle happening, and suddenly you're able to jump into a ship, leave Hoth, and see that same battle from the air. This is a very unique experience. It extends the fantasy, and what you're doing on the ground affects what your teammates may be doing in the air, and vice versa.
And in 16-player infrastructure mode, we allow players to play on any of the different layers. So it basically brings to life that Star Wars experience that you saw in the movies, where you had massive ships in space and a massive battle going on the ground, and we brought them together.
A lot of fans always wondered that what if Battlefront 3 released, and I'm one of those people. And it makes me think what state this franchise would be in had it released. I'm not here to review this game, but I think even in this state, as a handheld game, the ambition of what they accomplished on a PSP is no mean feat. This dream of going ground to air to space was realized, not in 2025, but 2009. One thing we don't know is how well it sold. There is no sales data anywhere to suggest how this game performed. This was the last time we saw Battlefront for a few years. It is hard to put everything down to a single factor, whether it was a change in mindset at LucasArts, fans were burned out, or simply the failings of Battlefront 3 was too much for them. Now, for a time, the series went dormant. Well, at least it appeared that way. Very little is known about Star Wars Battlefront Online. LucasArts countered this game before it was ever even announced. But the developer, Slant6 Games, responsible for Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City and the SOCOM series, all we have about this is concept art. But seeing as by 2013, the studio shut down, it could be down to a number of factors. Poor review scores of the previous title, or being in a poor financial place.
Today, I am proud to announce the Walt Disney Company is acquiring Lucasfilm, the global entertainment company founded by George Lucas and the home of the legendary Star Wars franchise.
For the past 35 years, one of my greatest pleasures has been to see Star Wars pass from one generation to the next, said George Lucas. It's now time for me to pass Star Wars on to a new generation of filmmakers. I've always believed that Star Wars could live beyond me, and I thought it was important to set up the transition during my lifetime. I'm confident that with Lucasfilm under the leadership of Kathleen Kennedy and having a new home within the Disney organization, Star Wars will certainly live on and flourish for many generations to come. Just 3 years after the release of Elite Squadron and 1 year after the signing over to Disney, Star Wars announced a multi-year, multi-title exclusive deal between Lucasfilm and EA. In a press announcement, they had this to say: industry leaders and creators of best-in-class blockbuster games, the development and publishing teams at EA will collaborate with the creative teams at Lucasfilm to provide audiences with all new gaming experiences set in the ever-expanding Star Wars galaxy. As part of the agreement, EA studio teams DICE for the Battlefield series, Visceral, the Dead Space series, will join BioWare, Mass Effect series, and the Old Republic in the development of new Star Wars games. Our number one objective was to find a developer who could consistently deliver our fans great Star Wars games for years to come, said Kathleen Kennedy, president of Lucasfilm. When we looked at the talent of the teams that EA was committing to our games and the quality of their vision for Star Wars, the choice was clear.
We have completely different games on the horizon, and I just hope that every fan walks away going, wow, I never thought they were going to bring my Star Wars fantasy to life.
DICE said creating Star Wars Battlefront is scary in an interview with IGN. Executive producer Patrick Bach spoke about inheriting the license at a BAFTA event in London via IGN, saying that staff at DICE were discussing the series days before EA revealed it had obtained the license for the game. It's quite interesting, said Bach. For some strange reason, coincidence, I don't know, we had a discussion at the office about what happened to Battlefront. You know, the old IP that someone else made. That was a rip-off Battlefield. Bastards. We should have made it, he continued. It was a competition of powers. We couldn't do both at the same time. For some reason, EA was negotiating with Lucas and Disney as to whom should make the next Star Wars game. And just a week later, it was like, oh, by the way, that discussion you were having about Star Wars, do you want to make it? With the highest praise for the series as a whole being its multiplayer experience, it doesn't surprise me as to why they would go with a developer like DICE. So, after a behind the scenes at E3 2014, they visited previous set locations in a partnership with Lucasfilm and got their hands on actual used props from the archives.
To stay as true to the films as possible, we went back to where it all began. Visiting the Lucas archives to capture the actual models and props used in the movies was an incredibly emotional experience. There's so much love and detail in these pieces that we want to get into the game.
It was in 2014 that we got Battlefield 4, and while today it is seen as a great game, its launch was pretty buggy and had a plethora of problems on every platform, and they plagued it for months. To players, this was seen as an insight on what could be with their first iteration of Battlefront. So while players are excited, it can be important to add context on how we felt at the time. EA said this was a result of innovation. Andrew Wilson, EA boss, had this to say in an interview with Eurogamer. Think about what Battlefield 4 was. 64-player multiplayer, giant maps, 1080p, Levolution that was changing the gameplay design in an emergent way. There is a chance there are things that you're going to miss through the development cycle, and you end up in the situation we had with Battlefield 4. For me, the situation we had was unacceptable. For the team, it was unacceptable. We have worked tirelessly since then to make sure the gameplay experience got to where it absolutely should have been at launch. And we're focused on that, and we continue to deliver value to that player base. It wasn't until spring 2015 that we got meaningful information on what this game will be. The reveal trailer got fans excited, but we got to see Endor, Hoth, and a unique location known in the expanded universe as Sullust. Unlike Battlefront 2, you see fighters available on ground missions again. Now made with the Frostbite 3 engine, the game looks stunning, and it's the first time the series looks truly next-gen. We got a look at a brand new mode called Walker Assault, which is a new take, albeit much more linear, than what the series was known for. In this mode, two walkers for the Empire need to get to the end objective to destroy the target. One side will support it, while the other tries to get rid of it. The trailer has all the hallmarks of a modern game trailer, turning the game into a movie, but it gave us a good idea as to the flow of the game mode. In partnership with Criterion, they unveiled the Fighter Squadron mode, which is an objective-based game mode where you get to play as the classic fighters and heroes from the original trilogy. It is basic in objectives, and the maps are only planet-side. There will be no space battles in this game. Recognizing that people don't always want to play online to learn how to play the game, that is where the co-op missions were announced. These are usually wave-based survival modes that can be played in split screen or online. In an interview with Game Center HQ, Adam Sessler, the producer Craig McLeod had this to say when it came to this mode.
And that's where our missions are really great. That's where you can play on your own, cooperatively with a friend, split screen or online, against AI. So, you can practice, you can learn, you can start getting better before you move into that multiplayer environment. Our trials in particular are great for this. They're actually designed for that onboarding process for new players.
Star Wars Battlefront EA is a back to basics, with the game using only the original trilogy, and this could be down to a few factors. With the animated Clone Wars series cancelled, there was no prequel trilogy content being made. However, Star Wars Rebels was being actively worked on, and with how divisive the fanbase is, picking the original trilogy was the safest option. This was the first game to be released as a part of the multi-year deal, so a quick turnaround was needed. And the highly anticipated Episode 7 was around the corner. Much like in previous games in the series, releasing the game around the hype of the films was critical. However, to make sure this happened, some cuts were made. In an article on The Escapist, Patrick Sutherland, EA Studios boss, said the following in an investor broadcast. "We made the choice due to time and being able to launch the game side by side with the movie that came out to get the strongest possible impact. A part of these cuts was a campaign mode. The time needed to develop the story wasn't feasible in the time constraints." On the 17th of November, 2015, Star Wars Battlefront released to an average of 75, and Patrick Sutherland had the following to say. "I think the team created a really good game based on the premise that we had. I would say the game has done very well for us and reached a very different demographic than a traditional EA game. So from that perspective, it's a success. Are we happy with the 75 rating? No. Is that something we're going to cure going forward? Absolutely." The game sold very well, with over 14 million units, but that doesn't mean it wasn't without its controversies, as well as one of the biggest at the time for me personally. And that was the deluxe edition, including a blaster in the game, the DL-44, known best as Han Solo's weapon. If this was only a skin, there wouldn't be an issue, but it just happened to be stronger than any weapon at launch, and while it could be earned in-game, you'd be spending considerable amount of time getting beaten by those who spent a bit extra money, leading people to think it was going to be a pay-to-win experience. The requirements were to get to level 25 and spend 2,500 credits, the max level being 50. Battlefront definitely felt a bit closer to its Battlefield roots. This game is much as focused on the pick up and play compared to its previous titles, with unlockable weapons, cards, and loadouts. This was the first game in the series to feature paid additional content. They started with a free downloadable content called Battle of Jakku to tie in with the recent release of Force Awakens. Ironically, I remember avoiding this game for 2 weeks so I wouldn't get spoiled before I had a chance to see the film, and then I got spoiled in Rocket League instead. We got Jakku in December 2015, Outer Rim in March 2016, Bespin in June, Death Star in September, and when Rogue One released, Scarif DLC came out for the season pass holders 1 week before the film even released, giving an early look at the tropical archive of the Empire. You could buy all of these individually or get the season pass. At release, it was $50. Just after a year, it dropped to $30, and now it's about $20. Although, it would be hard to recommend this because no one is really playing this game anymore in 2025. No matter what anyone had to say about Battlefront, everyone agreed one thing. The graphics and the sound design is phenomenal. Even by today's standards, it holds up. And for you PC savvy people out there, the recommended graphics card was a GTX 970. The minimum is 660. One thing is abundantly clear. There was one game mode in particular everyone missed, and that was Galactic Conquest, and innovation on the series as a whole. This game felt more like a reset. What were some common criticisms of this game? Well, you've just heard all of the DLC maps. On launch, we received just 4 for Walker Assault. Arguably the poster boy of this game, while other game modes were present, they didn't feel very fleshed out. It became a tough game to recommend on a value proposition, when you need not only a full price game, but a season pass to appreciate it more down the line. Balance. Weapons aside, playing as the Rebels is just worse all around. You have no ground vehicle to counter the ATST. While the Imperials can build their loadouts around being the baddest guy in town, if you're a rebel, anti-vehicle is the only way you can go, putting you at an inherent disadvantage alongside not being able to get into your own tank. Blasters are clumsy and random, just like Obi-Wan said. To make up for the lack of recoil compared to weapons we have in this age, they opted for a random spread, as some kind of attempt to make it casual friendly, and not including how many gunfights end in you just killing each other at the same time. Fighter Squadron is a little too basic in its implementation. It is much easier to fly with a controller as opposed to keyboard and mouse, and a personal gripe is that it was generally much easier and better to play in third person as someone who likes the view from the cockpit. But that's a me thing. However, the game mode itself was a glorified team deathmatch with the occasional please shoot down a transport or shuttle. Overall, it was lack of depth, full price for not a lot, funky gunplay, bad balance, spawns, and a questionable progression. At this point, leaked footage of Free Radical's cancelled game was out in the public. In a pre-release interview with Game Informer, I grabbed the following quote. I then asked Ingvar's daughter, and I hope I'm saying it correctly, if DICE had any modes that were reflective of Free Radical's vision of its cancelled Battlefront project, which would have allowed a battle to start on a planet's surface and transition to space combat. In our game, we want to bring the fantasy of dogfighting to players, she said. We bring you the X-Wing, and we bring you the TIE Fighter, and other vehicles that you want to fly in and experience, but we keep them on the planet's surface. I can see a couple reasons behind this. If you want to allow Free Radical's vision to truly be imagined, you either need a lot of bots or a lot of players. Walker Assault is 20 versus 20, and that can sound like a lot, but by the time you divide the player count up between the ground, dogfighting on the planet, the space, and those the capital ship, you'd be lucky to have that evenly split with 10 in each sector. This also makes marvels of games like MAG on the PS3 truly insane, because they allowed 125 versus 125. The reason why I bring this up, and I'm struggling to find where it was exactly said, but that simply Free Radical's vision isn't possible due to technology reasons. This could be true. It could be time on their own part, or limit specifically with their own Frostbite 3 engine. The lack of space battles was another topic of conversation, and the DICE general manager, Patrick Bach, took to the official PlayStation magazine, re-reported by, and said the following. We want players to stay in the same environment. We don't want players to fly off and do something over here. It's about the Battlefront experience, so we want to keep you in atmosphere and fighting with the infantry. There is something to be said about limiting the player field and forcing everyone to be closer together. It's much easier to create the old film feeling, like in the trenches of Hoth or the chaos at Endor. There is something to be said about limiting the player field and forcing everyone to be closer together. It's much easier to create the old film feelings, like in the trenches at Hoth or the chaos at Endor. However, it's Star Wars, and without space battles, it's just wars. Time has looked more favourably on Battlefront 1. Since its release on Steam, the reviews are currently sat at 80%, whereas Metacritic's user score is a 5.1. This could be down to a couple main factors, the main, in my opinion, being the price. It never hit Steam at full price, so its non-discounted rate is £18 or your regional equivalent, and it's often seen as low as £2.69. Which, at that point, it's hard not to recommend many games at that price. 14 million sales is undeniable, and as a result, the month before the release of the Bespin DLC, it was announced that EA is working on a sequel. But before we move on to Battlefront 2, I found this comment in the interview with Adam Sessler particularly funny.
I'm an old guy, you know, and if I do play like Battlefield or something like that, there are young people that can school me with their quick reflexes.
In getting footage for this game, I was somehow lucky enough to find an online match, and never before have I related to an interviewer so well.
I still remember my last orders. The day the real war began.
On the 10th of May 2016, the development of Star Wars Battlefront 2 was announced. Led by DICE, with Motive Studios being responsible for the single-player campaign and Criterion responsible for the Starfighters gameplay and mechanics, during an earnings call, EA Chief Financial Officer Blake Jorgensen stated the game would have content from the sequel trilogy of films. Some lessons were learned with their first installment, and one big issue was fragmentation of the player base. And speaking about this, with Mashable is creative director Bernard Dimer, and he said the following: "We decided on that, and it's one of those difficult decisions because it had so many implications all around." He continued, "When we looked at the way Battlefront had evolved over its lifetime with the DLC and everything, we decided, you know what, for this type of game, season passes are not the best thing. We need to take it apart and come up with something better." Dimer admitted that it's dangerous to the health of a game's community when new maps and new modes are locked behind a paywall. It creates a situation where, as he put it, the community is falling apart because there are simply not many people playing the different modes. So we definitely want to avoid that. In a PlayStation roundtable at EA Play, this was reiterated. Segmentation was a real problem, and Craig McLeod, producer at DICE, said they were now moving further towards the live service method by dropping themed free community updates, with the first being a new planet from The Last Jedi.
Numbers aren't everything.
My name is Dennis Brenvall. I work as the franchise design director at DICE in Stockholm on Star Wars Battlefront.
Going from Battlefront 1 to 2 is surprisingly long and cumbersome, and it isn't as simple as copying and pasting. Dennis Brenvall said in an interview with Cinematic Captures on YouTube, the core reason being they are different versions of the Frostbite engine. This, combined with making a more robust character system, so it can be surprising how, despite creating many assets for the previous game, not a lot of time was saved when making the sequel. I found this point really interesting when it comes to the developer process. For a sequel, Dennis had this to say: "We're talking about a week or two of savings, versus the benefit of adding something that's completely new that our base will be really excited for because they haven't seen it in a DICE game before. So that's always the trade-off." A very common complaint with Battlefront EA was that the heroes were simple, and especially when it came to hero versus hero fighting, it was very lackluster. To fix this, there were some key design changes. Dennis had the following to say:
One, when you did a force choke or you try to do a force push, the only way to make it really feel like you're tossing someone was if they died. So that's why you could one-shot troopers all the time with everything they were doing, so that we could trigger ragdoll and then they just fling them away and then it looked cool. But when Darth Vader tried to force choke Luke, or when Luke tried to force push Vader, it was just like a little, you just nudged him barely, caused some damage, and that was everything that character system was able to do. But in Battlefront 2, we really wanted you to be able to pick up a hero or a villain and throw him away, and then that person can stand up again and you can continue fighting. So then we needed an entirely new system, which meant that we pretty much needed to rebuild the characters from scratch in engine.
In a video by Harvey Newman, the lead animator for Battlefront 2, discusses the process of creating heroes.
We spent, the team and myself, I think it was about 3.5 months, maybe 4 months, working on one hero. We had to decide which one is going to be the hero that is going to set the trends and going to be the linchpin for the whole thing. And that hero ended up being Darth Maul. So looking at Darth Maul in game right now, it feels a bit cringy to me, and the reason why is because there's so many things that I would change, because we kind of set his whole logic and combat so early that by the time we actually ship the game and continue working in the game for another 4 years, I wish I could have revised Darth Maul based on the things that we've learned. But that first initial Darth Maul that is still the one that is in the game right now, that became the linchpin for the characters. And what we had to find was very much about the combat, right? How would Jedi combat with lightsabers happen in game in a way that was satisfying? So we had to be clever about deciding how much effort we wanted to add into this, because this was going to be a massive endeavor and we'll have to actually do this for every single other hero in the game.
Harvey was brought on because of his skills in hand key animation. Battlefront 1 was a majority motion cap driven, which can hamper creativity, which makes sense when they're animating characters like Yoda and other force-sensitive space wizards. Early on, they wanted to make sure that all the personalities of the characters were captured, and it's these small details you can appreciate looking back, whether it's the elegance of Count Dooku, the clumsiness of an Ewok, or the confidence of Lando. This all ties in with that new system Dennis was talking about earlier. In the classic Battlefront series, the campaign was seen as a way to experience movie moments but also how to play the game. And that was missing from DICE's first iteration, as it was cut due to time constraints. In an interview with Gamasutra, with Mitch Dyer, writer for Motive Studios, we can get an insight into why they chose to create their own character when they asked this question. Do Star Wars games need movie characters to succeed? You see, especially in the comics and in the novels, they inch away from the iconic characters that you know. You get a little further away. You get closer to the original stuff. New planets, ships, races, characters, all these things, because that's what you would expect. The extra material outside the films to broaden what you already know. With games, it's the same thing. You definitely want to add new characters, and we always knew if we were going to do a Battlefront game about a soldier, we wanted it to be an original character. We never wanted to do, what's Captain Rex up to? He's a soldier, let's use him. We wanted to have an original character. But it's connective tissue, right? Star Wars is a single story, and Battlefront 2's chapter in it. The Last Jedi is a chapter in it. You have these connective pieces in a galaxy that is really big. And whether it's somebody as important to the galaxy as Luke Skywalker, or just something as iconic and notable from a smaller perspective, as a Gonk droid or a Wookiee, if you see a Wookiee, you say, ah, this is Star Wars. Dyer further elaborated on one particular moment, when we went to Lucasfilm and said, hey, we want to do a Luke Skywalker mission. And they said, cool. Why? And we said, oh, because it would be awesome. And they said, okay, cool. That's not an answer. Why don't you come back with one? Because they don't want to do anything frivolous, especially with someone like Luke Skywalker. You don't just get to throw that dude around and say, my Luke Skywalker story. You need to do something significant to justify having a kind of story like that. So for us, it was two things. It was one, we got to do a Luke Skywalker story that felt significant, not only for our character Del, but for where Luke is going. You know he finds an object that has a significant story to be told. And then we got to write the most compassionate, good guy in all of fiction, and that felt really good. Especially like this year. Being able to talk through someone like Luke Skywalker who spared someone's life
because you asked.
People have asked me for good recent examples of Star Wars storytelling, and regardless of what you think of the overall story, the Luke mission, in my opinion, is one of the best examples we've ever had of him.
I'm glad we were brought together, Del.
So what happens now? We both walk off in separate directions and pretend like this never happened.
I don't think you can. There's still conflict in you.
Of course there's conflict in me. I'm not blind. I know what the Empire is capable of, but what else is there?
A choice?
A rebellion?
No. A choice to be better. May the Force be with you.
The story follows an Imperial Special Forces soldier, Iden Versio, daughter of an admiral serving in the Inferno Squadron, and directly follows the aftermath of the destruction of the Death Star 2. If you're hoping to play an evil little maniac, this isn't a story for you, because it shows the eventual disenfranchisement with the Empire because of seeing how loyal worlds are treated by the Emperor's Operation Cinder. Like in previous games, the story is used to introduce the player to a variety of mechanics, whilst also trying to create something new in the Star Wars universe. While it does use the cast from time to time, it is the first case of a Battlefront game not relying directly on the films to invoke a sense of feeling for the player. Instantly, you see an Imperial sad about the Death Star, and while what transpires is nothing that will blow your socks off, I will say the ending is a spectacle to behold, with it being the Battle of Jakku, the true, in quotes, end of the Empire.
I've waited 30 years for this.
On the 15th of April, 2017, at Star Wars Celebration, DICE unveiled the reveal trailer for Battlefront 2. The first thing that's incredibly prominent is the focus on the untold soldier story from the perspective of someone in the Empire. Sequel trilogy was front and center. After all, this game will be released a mere month before The Last Jedi comes out. However, unlike DICE's previous title, you will be able to play in every era of Star Wars, and space battles are back. Fast forward to the 6th of October, fans outside of EA Play are able to play the latest installment of Battlefront in an open beta, where there were two modes, Galactic Assault, the new iteration of Walker Assault, located on Naboo, and the Starfighter Assault on Fondor, a brand new game mode in space. Now, Walker Assault goes beyond just guiding a walker to the end of the objective. Now, it's just the first half, and once you accomplish that, you'll have a few more objectives. If you're defending, the goal is simple. Take the Disruptor Rifle to the enemy walker and hit it. This will allow your brothers in arms a damage window on the enemy transport. If you get it to 0, you win. But there's more. The number of health left on the ship, plus 50, is the number of reinforcements available for the next phase of play. So as long as you drop the health below that, it's a net win for your team, then you'll have to defend a series of objectives trying to drain their reinforcements to 0. But every time you lose a wave, they gain 50 reinforcements. For Starfighter Assault, it follows a similar vein, but you complete the objectives before you run out of fighters. The core gameplay is extremely fun. I've always enjoyed objective-based gameplay, and between the two modes, I dropped a whopping 26 hours in the open beta weekend. But this open beta highlighted a problem, and that is the core progression. To understand the loot box controversy, we have to first understand how the economy of the game worked, and thanks to a Reddit post, we have the original numbers. And these are from EA Access, those who paid extra to be able to play the game early, like a pre-launch, something that's very common in today's age. The average match for Galactic Assault was 11 minutes and 9 seconds. The average credits you earn in a match is 275. The credits per minute of gameplay was around 25.04, and it took 159 minutes to unlock a Trooper crate. With all that in mind, how much does it cost to unlock a hero? 60,000. Yeah, you heard me, 60,000 credits. So, with the sums in mind, it would take 2,395.97 minutes to unlock one hero. That is just shy of 40 hours. So if you saw the trailers and couldn't wait to live out your power fantasy of slicing dudes up as Lord Vader, think again. Now, while only Luke and Vader cost that amount, Palpatine, Chewbacca, and Leia were around 40,000 credits. But let's face it, when you want to play a hero, you're not going to settle with your second favourite. Then there is part 2 of the controversy. Trooper, Starfight, and hero crates. There are loot boxes that contain random upgrades on the expanded star card system. These cards can have emotes, poses, crafting materials, and upgrades from making your grenade stronger, health regen faster, and much more. Each card can be upgraded 3 additional times for significant advantages. In a video by the late and great Turtle Biscuit, he talks at length on this topic, and showcases just how significant these upgrades are. Boba Fett's rocket barrage invulnerability goes from 50 to 100%, literally making him invincible. Troopers going from 10 to 40% quicker health regen. More powerful grenades. It's hard to look at the system and call it anything other than what it is. Pay to win. That's because you can pay for these crates. In a spreadsheet I found breaking this down on Reddit compares the hourly wage in the US to buying 60 Trooper crates versus gameplay time to earn 60 Trooper crates. At the time, minimum wage was $7.25. It would take you 13.79 hours at that wage, totaling just shy of $100. Alternatively, you could earn this in gameplay time, and that was 157.54 hours. What cements that is when you get more cards, it levels up that class, vehicle, or hero. So you could start the game, buy a bunch of crates, and immediately have a competitive advantage, and all of that for a game you paid for in the first place. With players understandably outraged and the government agencies looking into Battlefront with gambling concerns, EA tried a few times between the beta and the EA Access early week to appease the fans. Now it's the official launch day and EA turned off microtransactions in the early hours of the morning. Quoting Eurogamer, according to VentureBeat sources, Disney boss Bob Iger phoned EA boss Andrew Wilson shortly before the U-turn was announced to discuss Star Wars Battlefront 2. John Bain, aka Total Biscuit, summed it up best.
The question is, are we going to accept that? Well, a lot of people are. And even if all of us, everyone that watched this video, everyone that was aware of this video decided not to buy, it might make a bit of a dent. But the sad thing is that it's not going to make a difference. This game's going to sell millions. You know what the really sad thing is? That after playing the beta, I actually really quite enjoyed it. Compared to the original, I think it's much, much better. The map, they could have definitely picked a better one for it, but the objective-based play and the way the classes work, and the way that they synergize and buff each other, made me feel like I was really part of a squad, part of an army, and working towards a goal. And of course, there was a huge different selection of vehicles and heroes that I could access, and taking away that random power-up system from the first game, I think was a great idea as well. if the game sucked, I would be much less upset about this. Problem is, it doesn't suck. It's actually quite entertaining. And this system just... It's not even a blemish. It's covering it in goop. It's horrible.
How did the game perform? Well, we don't have the best sales data. The last we heard of Battlefront 2 was back in 2020, and it sold 9 million units by the end of the year, which is an impressive feat considering the disastrous reception it had received, and it is worth noting that it would already place it amongst the best-selling ever Star Wars games. Sales numbers are a little shaky, seeing as the game has been discounted many times for as little as £4 in the UK. And at that price, I have sent several copies to friends begging them to play it with me. There's no point covering how well this game was received critically and amongst its initial user base, because the combination of loot boxes and terrible progression plagued all of it. In a video released by Harvey Newman on his own YouTube channel, he showed how the launch felt. So before I say anything else here is what he had to say.
So here, just before the launch, we're all hype. We were all like, this game is going to be amazing. However, we could tell that there might be some trouble coming because of the loot boxes. And internally, as the devs, there's not much we can do about it. We can implement certain things, but there's not much that we can say strategically which way the game is going to go. We just have to trust that basically things, up ahead in the leaderships, they're actually really awesome and they know exactly where they're going with the marketing, with the finances and stuff. Unfortunately, it very much blew up in our faces, and everybody knows about like the loot box fiasco that has happened, and all the governments that basically changed their laws due to the Battlefront, and play to win and all these other things, and it became way bigger than any of us actually thought about. And it was incredibly deflating after spending so much time working on the game to see so much work that went into the game just be like muddled by just the outer shell, right? Which was very much like the cards and the paying for cards and pay to win and things like that. Because nobody was talking about the gameplay aspect of it. Everybody was talking about just the money things. That nobody was talking about how good is the game really, right? So it felt odd and everybody felt deflated, and I don't blame anybody. There was a lot of people internally and externally that felt very much like this game is dead in the water. But there was a few of us that really believed in what we worked on. The bones of the game was solid.
The launch was deflating for the dev team, because regardless of how the game played, all the conversations about Battlefront 2 was about its gambling and pay-to-win nature. After all, this game sparked conversations across multiple governments when it came to regulating gambling in video games. And while this is not the most egregious example, it sparked outrage in a paid Star Wars shooter. And with how Battlefront 1 went, the community was already looking for pay to win. After all, publisher EA owned FIFA, now known as FC, alongside Madden and many others. With modes such as Ultimate Team, I think it's safe to say we, the player, are desperate to not see these kinds of monetization practices in some of our most beloved franchises. And just a month prior, we saw microtransactions in a single-player game called Middle-earth: Shadow of War. This could simply be a matter of the straw that broke the camel's back. What always hurt me most with this game in particular is that even to this day, I'm screaming from the hilltops that this game is amazing, and no matter how many changes, it cannot get past its image from pre-launch. Still, I see images of Darth Maul from this game used on the cover of YouTube videos that are discussing pay to win. It's important to show the side of the developers. We could easily blame everyone at a company for certain things happening, and I've had many conversations with people where anger was directed at the wrong people. And while I think the best thing you can do is, if you don't like a product, is to not buy it, we live in a time where we have to show anger instead. So please consider the singular, tens or hundreds of people who all take part in the process of making games and understand how certain decisions can be made. Thank you again, Harvey, for giving me permission to use your video. I have not included everything because I highly recommend you go see the video for yourself, which will be linked below. The best example of how players feel about it now is when the game was re-released on Steam and is currently sat at 85% positive reviews. But you do have to factor the prices it was bought at and the fact it has all the amazing patches and updates throughout the years, which brings me to the next part.
Hello there. 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 I'm Dennis Brenwald from the Star Wars Battlefront 2 team.
Starting in April 2018, just 1 month after cosmetic microtransactions were introduced, they started community transmissions known as CTs. Battlefront 2 has learned from its predecessor and transitioned from the old DLC map model to a live service one. Free updates, which prevent fragmentation in the community, while hoping the updates and cosmetics make enough money to cover the costs. Before this, we already received the Last Jedi crossover with the planet Crate, and going across on the speeder, kicking red dust as the walkers approach you in the trenches is awesome. Even if I spent the whole time engaging in a cross-map sniping contest with what feels like a former esports pro. If you're a Halo fan, you'll remember the game mode Infected. The first CT was exactly that, except imagine you're a stormtrooper being hunted down in the dark with what is safe to say the cheapest torch, as the deadliest furballs make you regret all those times you focused them in the original games. It was the first real positive sign that this game wasn't going to be abandoned. What followed was every month something new came to the game, and I might as well just rapid fire through them. April, Night on Endor. The Han Solo season, which was a crossover with new solo skins, a new map and a new mode. Hero Starfighters, which is like Heroes vs Villains but in space. In August there were some new skins for Clone Troopers, and Ewok Hunt mode was made permanent. And now if you want to only play the prequel maps, there is a filter for it. September brought squad-based spawning, more Clone Trooper skins, and a matchmaking system that better tries to match you to people at your skill level.
The balance of the Force has been shaken. The Clone Wars have begun.
October brought Obi-Wan and General Grievous, along with a brand new planet, Geonosis. At the time, I remember many people being hyped just because they could now play an armoured officer. But this update made DICE seem like they were on a roll, and that is only in 2018.
Your move.
2019 brought another huge series of updates. We got Count Dooku, and then we got Anakin Skywalker with some new Clone Trooper skins. March brought in arguably the biggest update of them all, with what they call the Infiltrator Reinforcements, which are ARC Troopers and Commando Droids, along with a return to form called Capital Supremacy. Capital Supremacy was a move to bring back the older style of Battlefront with a less linear objective-focused mode. Simply capture objectives, the first to max points will be able to earn bonus reinforcements for the next phase of play, which is to try and take down the enemy capital ship. You follow a series of objectives to get to the end and destroy it from the inside. If you fail, you go back to the first phase of play. But the damage done is remembered, so it's not wasted time, and while this mode is great, it's possible to get stuck in a loop of always winning the ground phase and never winning the capital ship phase. I have a fond memory of playing with my friend Jack, and we took 3 hours to beat 1 match. What follows is Capital Supremacy being expanded to more and more map from Kashyyyk, then to Kamino. June brings Droidekas and Naboo with Supremacy. At this point, I'm just rattling off updates, but it cannot be overstated just how much was added to this game. The next being the most important for those who don't always want to play PvP. We got Co-op, which is like Galactic Assault, but it's a 4-player objective-based mode against AI, also split by eras, along with a full instant action mode, customizable with map and difficulty. And then we got another new map, Felucia. With the release of Rise of Skywalker, we got new enemies, expanded Capital Supremacy to a new era. Before it was just the prequels, and now the sequels get it too. A new planet and yet more reinforcements. The original trilogy got some love. Now you can play as your very own killer teddy bear or sinister ISB agent, and in the Death Star. Scarif was the final update for this game that we would ever see. I think this was partly to cover all of the Disney era films, but they ended this community transmission with the following.
With the Battle on Scarif update, we've realized our vision with Star Wars Battlefront 2, to empower you to immerse yourself in epic battles from your favorite Star Wars era your own way. Join me. I'm extremely proud of what the team has accomplished through launch and the many updates after. We now hand it over to you. With the servers, in-game challenges, and recurring events continuing to stay live, we look forward to hearing your stories from the Battlefront for years to come. On behalf of all of us, thank you very much, and may the Force be with you always.
In the same video by Harvey Newman, he spoke about working on the dev team during the live service phase. Originally, a large number of the team had been moved to Battlefield 5, but because he loved Battlefront, was able to get put on the team of 40 tasked with the revival of the game. This number would eventually rise to 70, and everyone was in one office, allowing for a great synergy between all departments, from animators, designers, developers, marketing, and more. After the initial wave of players who were against the game, those who were left really believed in what they were making, and this is relevant because this facilitated a great feedback loop on places such as Reddit.
We felt that the world was our oyster because not only could we come up with good ideas, but the community came up with ideas, and then every single update that we gave us a view of the direction that we should take next. Like it was like a lot of feedback, but it was always good feedback, all of like, guys, you guys should, like, this character is OP for these reasons, the animations get stuck here, or anything like that basically go, got it, let's create a bug for it and let's fix it. And this is why we managed to do so much with a skeleton crew so fast in Battlefront 2.
This was one of the cases where I really enjoyed the live service model. It was used to ensure bugs were fixed, balances happened, and with each update they could adapt in either direction depending on the feedback they would receive. And they recognised that in the past they felt separate from the community, but now they're a part of it. The end of the live service at Battlefront was sudden to the dev team, but not a surprise. The writing was on the wall. This does mean that there was planned content that we'd never got to see. Maps like Mustafar, heroes such as Ahsoka never saw the light of day, and it shows the true extent of the Star Wars universe. It's not a matter of coming up with something for the game, it's a choice of picking what great thing to bring into the experience. And even after all of this, it shows how great of an environment it was, because Harvey would happily go back with everyone and bring us Battlefront 3. Fast forward to June 2025, Battlefront 2 hit its highest numbers on Steam for concurrent players, hitting a huge 35,892. It's worth noting that this is only the numbers for Steam. I'm a PC player who owned the game before it was there, so it wouldn't include many fans returning on EA Play, Xbox and PlayStation. So the true numbers are hard to know without EA telling us. If I've learned anything about Battlefront, it's that the community is amazing at keeping itself alive, and I feel I'd be doing all of you a disservice if I didn't tell you about the folks at Kyber. Kyber is a service that provides dedicated servers 24/7 with support for community-created mods, voice chat, and more. It makes the modding process incredibly easy. You simply click on the server you want to join, you'll have a list of mods you need to have, and then you click to download them, all on the same launcher. You can also host private servers. For many, this is seen as a what if Battlefront stayed in its live service phase, with additional characters such as Din Djarin, aka the Mandalorian, Asajj Ventress, Ahsoka Tano, Captain Rex, and so many more. And not just heroes, but reinforcements too. Just in case EA is listening to this, it still requires a purchase of the game, and the way it forces you into offline mode on your launcher, it doesn't cross over with EA's official servers, so you don't have to be worried about getting banned for using mods on their servers. I got to play the open beta for myself, and I was honestly impressed at how easy the service was, how friendly the players were, so if you want the great gameplay of Battlefront 2 2017 with all its updates, and the addition of community mods, I highly recommend check Kyber out. In May of this year, it even hit 12th in the sales in the US. It's worth noting that it would be heavily discounted, as a lot of Star Wars games are, in May, but it's a guaranteed time you get everyone looking back nostalgically, and I often host an original Battlefront server, and strangers would join, even to this day. It's always a fun time seeing people excited for your interests. It's a combination of fans feeling vindicated, but also seeing people experience a game they held off on because of the launch. For the first time, appreciating the devs for what they did, the community for banding together all in our shared hope of getting Battlefront 3, and no one knows what lies next for the series, with reportedly EA stepping back from licensed titles, preferring to stay within its own. We are still getting a couple titles from them, but maybe they're not willing to take the risk. So, who will?
Your simulation days are over, Trooper. This is a real battle.
In the classic Battlefront games, with massive 64-player online battles and split-screen local gameplay, get ready for the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection, launching March 14th.
In a time where remasters, re-releases, and remakes are a constant, it can be easy to dismiss something before it even comes out. However, there is a value behind remasters. The original two Battlefronts were never made available anywhere outside of its own console generation. Now it is on Steam, routinely put on offer, and thanks to an update many years after release, it is still playable online to this date. But it's worth remembering, not everyone has a PC, and not everyone was around or still has a PS2 with a copy of the game. If anything, the idea alone can be a good one purely to make it accessible to a new generation. But that's a topic we could discuss at length another time. The announcement came via a Nintendo showcase. The focus was pretty clear. Enjoy the game you know and love with upgraded visuals and 64 multiplayer matches, both in the announcement and the launch trailer. This was being handled by the American game developer and publisher Aspyr, who are a part of the Embracer Group. Their past works is usually re-releasing games on other platforms such as Civilization 6, going to macOS and Linux, or remastering older games such as Star Wars The Force Unleashed, Tomb Raider Trilogy, Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, and many more. They even did the original macOS ports for Battlefront 1 and 2. How did it sell? All we have is the sales numbers from Steam according to the website Sensor Tower. It sold 231,000 units. There isn't any information on how it performed on Xbox, PlayStation, or the Switch. As Aspyr Media is a subsidiary under the Embracer Group, they do not hold their own earnings calls, so it's hard to find any more information. Unfortunately for this game, it launched to a couple controversies. The first being the file size. The original combined size was 12 gigabytes. It's now over 60. The game looks clearer and up-resed, but for many, the increase in clarity was not worth the 5x increase, and this might be because we are increasingly aware of how much storage everything takes up. And something about modern gaming, which is just checking what game you don't play so you can delete something and install what you just bought. Something that I was looking forward to with this game was a new release would give a renewed interest and bring us all together with modern dedicated servers, so we could all play this beloved classic together. After all, nostalgia is a powerful drug, but on the day of launch, over 10,000 players tried to join just 3 64-player servers. And the ones who were lucky enough to get into one of these were met with instability, and the following statement was released. At launch, we experienced critical errors with our network infrastructure. The result was incredibly high ping, matchmaking errors, crashes, and servers not appearing in the browser. Players can host their own servers, which should help, but some users report that feature isn't working properly for them either. PC Gamer thought they would check it out for themselves, and this would have been after some of the fixes were deployed, so they confirmed that 5 servers were available compared to the original 3. Along with all this, there were many other issues from textures not loading in, high ping, poor hit detection, flagging connections, not spawning a team into a match resulting in your instant loss or win, depending on which side you were on. The footage you're currently seeing is from a YouTuber called Bombastic. Fantastic, by the way, please go check them out. And before I get sidetracked, this was recorded after an update reportedly. You should see an improvement after ample changes. The original Battlefront 2 has some DLC platform exclusives. In 2021, a modder going by I Am a Shaman, I hope I got your name correct, I'm so sorry, brought this DLC to PC, reskinning 2 existing characters to look like Kit Fisto and Asajj. This was a reskin of Ki-Adi-Mundi and Ayla Secura. At the time, developer Aspyr insisted the release of Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection does not include any content or code taken from uncredited sources, telling IGN it mistakenly included content that is not in the product, after capturing placeholder footage for the trailer last fall. The modder took to Twitter to say the following: "Seriously, Aspyr Media, I'm beginning to feel insulted. Nintendo Switch launched with just straight up all my hero stuff from my mod. Same glitches and bugs. We've data mined it, and it's the exact same files, just using the proper lightsaber attack animations." This is before the patch. To back up this claim, here's a screenshot of that bubble effect taken in 2020. It is hard to make out in the video since it is in motion, but trust that it is the same. Legally, this is actually allowed, but the biggest issue for the modder was that no content was taken from an uncredited source, and this directly contradicts that. 1 year later, the Classic Collection received 3 major updates fixing numerous issues with the game, which begs the age-old question: why was this game released in this state? When given a fraction more time, it could have had a much better launch, because today, on PC, even the original Battlefront 1 performs better than the Classic Collection. And let's face it, thanks to mods, you can play your very own remastered version of these beloved classics with online compatibility intact. Which is why my gripe with this game is how they handled the online. Because the reality is, it is hard to find an online match on the original games, and no wonder. If this launched with full crossplay, enough dedicated servers, and none of its game-breaking bugs, it may have been enough even for us on PC to pick up a copy for the community and social element alone. But unfortunately for us, this came across as yet another industry cash grab. Still, this game is the only way for those without a PC to play this beloved classic, and while our dreams of getting together 64 people in the galaxy far, far away, but at least you can get a friend and conquer the galaxy together in split-screen galactic conquest. In an ideal world, this game would have been delayed till it was ready, had crossplay to ensure community health, and not taken the hard work of modders and shipped it claiming everything was their own. While EA to the fanbase really pulled us back with their constant hard work, the last memory we have of this beloved franchise is a disaster, with us still waiting and hoping for an actual sequel that lives up to what we all imagine. And that is no small task. But if you give me Battlefront 2 EA with co-op Galactic Conquest, I would be pretty damn happy. As it stands, we have no news on another Battlefront game, and a smaller scale shooter made by Respawn was cancelled a while ago. So once again, the series goes dormant, maintained only by those who are super passionate. To celebrate the release of this video, I'll be hosting a server in the original Battlefront 1. So if you want to join me in a nostalgia-fueled gaming session with some fun times, you can join me there on Steam. For more details, you can join the Discord or just log into the game and see if I'm on. This has been my most ambitious video yet. It's taken tons of research, surfing the archives, unreleased betas, interviews with devs, and so much more. There's a large amount of people who are the reason we have as much info about the series as we do today. So please take a moment to thank all of them for their hard work, and I truly hope you found something to enjoy about this video. And what will follow is a credit to who I hope is everyone who made this possible. Thank you for watching.